Hello? This hood's supposed to be on here? Well, I identified myself as the director of the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, which for 12 years has been carrying on a private research into UFOs with the intention of trying to get the facts and present them to Congress, the press, and the public. We have spent over 17 months with the Colorado Project. At their request, we helped them set up their investigation. We had our field subcommittees, which include scientists and engineers, help their teams. Actually, the points in here, which should be of interest. I'll do that first, and then a little later I'll have Dr. David Saunders here, who was formerly on the project. One of the two who was fired for opposing Dr. Condon's supposedly negative and biased approach. And Dr. James McDonald from the University of Arizona, there at the end of the table, who for 2 years or more has been making an extensive investigation into UFOs under a special grant. He's probably the best informed scientist in the United States on this subject. And Mr. Richard Hall next to him is a research consultant for NICAP. He was formerly the assistant director. And Mr. Gordon Lohr, who is now the assistant director of NICAP. Now, we find this Condon Report incredible. I'm sorry that we have to challenge it because we had hoped that this would be a very successful investigation and would really bring out some fruitful results. I'll admit that I personally was dubious at the start, but we did all we could to help them. But the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, even the Coast Guard, airline pilots, captains on every major airline in the United States and many of the secondary lines, control tower operators, astronomers, numerous scientists, radar trackers, and missile and satellite trackers, besides people of general competence and reliability in their areas. Now, the Condon Report investigated 59 cases. There are actually a few more than that in this voluminous report here. But their 59 case investigation sums up what they did for $500,000. Now, there are contradictions in this report. They state at the beginning that all the evidence is negative. There is no evidence indicating any reality of UFOs as devices under intelligent control. However, in the report itself, you will find numerous cases which say that apparently the object in there was real, and it looks as though it could be a UFO. There's one case, an English case, they investigated it in depth, and it says this, except for the possibility of something we don't know, looks like a genuine UFO. There are several interviews he made with any alleged UFO witness. Now, opposing the Condon Report are many scientists who have already said that they think we should have a new, complete scientific examination. The AIAA, the American Institute for Astronautics and Aeronautics, had recently released a statement saying that they spent a year, 2 technical committees went into this over a period of a year, and they came up with the conclusion that there should be. The controversy would not be ended until there was a new investigation. Now this, I have been told that this report was shown to Dr. Condon so that he would be aware of the fact. The chairman of the committees doing this investigation was a scientist at the Environmental Service Studies in Boulder. Now, ridicule has been a very unfortunate factor in this thing. I know, but what it boils down to, that anybody reports one now, they'll say, you're crazy, look what the Condon Report said. Now, if we let the Condon Report go unchallenged, we would be guilty of letting these people be victimized. And there are many people who have been badly hurt by official ridicule after sighting. The airline pilots today, most of them will not report a sighting publicly. And many pilots have told me that I wouldn't report one to the Air Force if the thing flew right in the cockpit. That because they cite the case of Captain Killian, who was very badly ridiculed and finally silenced by his airline. According to his wife, said he was pressured. They were pressured into it by the Air Force. Now that's hearsay, but the fact is the man since that time has never answered any questions. He will not go on TV, radio, and talk to reporters at all. A larger device, possibly higher up, and these others are under control or not. And there's one case which the...
You don't get my point. Are they being controlled by men on Earth or by
No.
men on extraterrestrial?
No, I'm not referring to the ones which have such high speeds and maneuvers at high speeds. They're completely beyond the possibility of anything we have now or even planning. The speeds, and the Air Force has put some of these on record. There was one case that they never have explained. It was where an object, a very large object, was tracked by radar, and a number of small objects which were tracked 5,240 miles an hour from a B-29. And people on board the B-29 saw the small objects. They merged with the big one, which then accelerated to over 9,000 and went off the scope.
In other words, they're either manned
or remote control.
Either manned or remotely controlled by extraterrestrial
by aliens of whom we know nothing.
Major King, there been a... You mentioned the term non-believer. What do you mean by a non-believer?
Well, that was Mr. Lowe's expression. A non-believer would be someone who did not believe at all in anything connected with UFOs, same way I used to be. Thought it was nonsense, complete nonsense. It took reading hundreds of reports and talking with hundreds of witnesses, many pilots and others, before I was convinced.
In your mind, does it boil down then to the case of believers and non-believers?
No, it doesn't. What it should boil down to is this: an open investigations, independent of any government agency. Maybe the government would have to provide some, but there should be some way of making it open so there would be no chance for charges of being biased, to find out what is back of this. Now, let's say that, all right, you don't have to prove the extraterrestrial answer, but here are reports that prove there have been devices under intelligent control, seen, tracked by radar, sometimes simultaneously tracked by two radar stations that get a fix on it. Now, one is often enough, but when you get two that confirm identically what is seen visually, that's a pretty tight case. Now, the Western Airport case is one that has never been explained. They called it a slight temperature inversion, but we have had proof, and the Weather Bureau furnished us with records about 1 to 1.5 degrees of temperature inversion, and it's impossible to get any such effect with an inversion of that kind. So there was an unexplained case.
Major Keogh, there's one question that's got to be asked, and a lot of people wonder, how is your organization financed? Are you in this to exploit it, the people's, I mean,
I understand.
Serious.
I know.
What is going to become of the profits from the book or the flood? Well, how do you operate? Where do
All
you
right.
get your money?
I came into NICAP first to take over and get it set up and then get back to my own profession of writing. And I wasn't a big name writer, but I was doing very well. I hadn't made less than $25,000 a year at that time, and I had offers which would have taken me into considerably higher brackets, including television in Hollywood. I got stuck with it because after I got it started, nobody would take it over, and they wouldn't take it over because NICAP didn't have any money. NICAP has gone along almost on the verge of going under for all those years. We've been financed by subscription, or rather membership fees, $5, which is a very small amount considering all that we do, and sales of occasional publications. For instance, this Air Force project, Grudge and Blue Book reports, which the Air Force denied they had for years, and finally through the Moss Committee we were able to get it sprung loose and we published it. Another one, the UFO evidence, it's over here somewhere, things of that kind, and donations. We never get enough money to keep us going without contributions. We have members who feel that this is a worthy thing and it's serious, and they find, I beg pardon?
How many members?
It's around 10,000 now, all 50 states and approximately 30 foreign countries.
Major, you raised the issue of objectivity of the scientists and Condon. I'd like to know whether
The majority conclusions of our Board of Governors and advisors, and that was a period of, say, several years ago, 3 or 4, was that the most probable answer was observation by extraterrestrial beings or controlled machines making observations of the Earth. Now this is exactly what the Air Force said in 1948. They've had a top secret estimate of the situation which said that these things were interplanetary devices. And they've denied it for years, but finally it was admitted in a letter to one of our subcommittee chairmen.
It's very easy for you to say that there is a top secret document, but can you prove this? Can you produce this document?
You can produce a letter saying there was such a document.
Does that mean anything? Can
Yes.
you produce the document?
Check with Dr. Heineck. We're all discussing
No,
this.
I tell you, I've spent years on this thing, just trying to get this top secret estimate. I beg pardon?
Who's the letter from? There is such a secret.
Lieutenant Colonel George Freeman, spokesman, Air Force Headquarters spokesman on UFOs, who wrote a lot of letters and official letters explaining these things. Now, this was sent to the head of our subcommittee in London, who's a capable investigator. But the point is, the letter stated that the information, this was first revealed by Ruppelt, who was the head of Project Blue Book for a while. The Air Force, for some reason, felt they should deny it, and it was denied by people on up to the rank of general. We could produce dozens of letters they sent to congressmen, senators, denying there ever was such a thing. They denied it on the Armstrong Circle Theater when I tried to bring it up.
There was, and a number of letters that said there wasn't. But
No, the letters, all the letters, up to the Freeman letters, denied the existence of this thing. Freeman came out and confirmed the fact that Ruppelt was right. There was such a thing, and the conclusion was that they were interplanetary probes or devices.
Yeah, how would you answer the Condon Committee says that even if there was such a letter, it in essence was unimportant because it represented lower level thinking that was overruled as not being well supported at a higher level?
It was overruled because the chief of staff said that it was certainly risky to put out such a statement when you could cause a lot of excitement and perhaps even panic. You have no answers to what the things might be, whether there was any hostility involved, and I don't know of any evidence there is, but at least it was overruled. But the point is that they denied it all that time. It was admitted in this letter by Freeman, which we can produce. If
What's the date of that letter?
was about a year ago. It was within the last year or so.
Yes, about
We have the letter. We have photostat of it, a Xerox. But we don't have it here because, frankly, I didn't intend to bring this up until you.
What was Freeman's job?
He is a Air Force Information Headquarters spokesman. I don't remember. He was in the there's a letterhead, Air Force letterhead says.
controlled machines that are doing observations. Now, there's no question in the world that there are controlled machines doing observations.
If the National Academy of Sciences had put 1/10 as much time into investigating these things and collecting reports from competent people, I mean daylight sightings of machines, not merely lights seen at night in the sky, formation, changing formation, radar scopes showing the formations and showing objects switch from one to the other, all of which were immediately classified by Air Force regulation. If they spent any time looking into it, they wouldn't have made that statement. Now, I was a skeptic too. It took me almost a year before I stopped laughing about it.
The Academy says, in our opinion, the scope of the study.
This particular question is a very interesting one, and I happen to have spent some time in the past year making a study of the nature of the kinds of points of view that one can have toward this problem. My conclusion in that area is that there are in fact 5 different points of view that one can have towards this problem. One of these I would label as prejudiced. A second one I would label as being party line. A third one I would label as being skeptical, and by that I mean open-minded. A fourth one would be that point of view of the believer, and a fifth one is the point of view of the contactee. Contactee, the individual who operates on the assumption that it is possible to communicate with the occupants of flying saucers or UFOs or whatever you choose to call them. Now, within this framework, we can recognize 2 points of view which are generally opposed to the reality of the UFO phenomenon, and 2 points of view which start from the assumption that the phenomenon is real. And 1 point of view, which I listed in the middle, which starts from the assumption that reports are real and may contain information that is of some potential value. Now, I've been asked to identify myself, and by now it should be obvious that I would prefer to be regarded in that middle point of view.
Pardon me.
What is the difference between a believer and a contactee?
The believer is someone who accepts the idea that there are real UFOs and directs his attention to the question, why are they here? What are they doing? What do they want from us? What are their motivations? There is the assumption of intelligence or intelligent control, but not necessarily the assumption of direct communication between these intelligences and our own intelligence.
If you have an expensive investigation, it's got to be financed privately or by the government. Now, the government, I probably will not, unless...
The confidence with which the directors of the project approached the study was so great that its conclusions were inevitable.
Yes, I think I will say that, because I talked with Dr. Condon so many times, and he said he was always misquoted, but every time he was misquoted, it was always in the one direction. We also have statements from people who were present at the meeting. One of them is a scientist at a meeting of scientists out at Gaithersburg, where he told a lot of these funny contactee stories and so forth. And the scientist, who was known to Dr. McDonald, said that they at no time gave any indication of a serious approach to it. And it was obvious if he kept on that way, it was going to be a negative report. And
Is it not what you were also saying, your evidence, you say in effect that there are enough sane, sensible, sophisticated people around the world or in this country who have seen or thought they have seen these things that are based on this evidence, they should not be repudiated as the content.
and ridiculed. That my income from NICAP it varies. It depends on how money comes in and doesn't, but it is less than 1/5 of what I was making at the time that I went into NICAP. And many times I've been told I should have my head examined for not having gotten out of it immediately. But when you believe in something and you resign just to get back to an easier, more lucrative life, it's immediately going to be stated, well, he found there was nothing to it. So I've stuck with it for that reason.
We have that statement, but I have looked at their files, interviewed now about 400 or 500 witnesses, have been at it a couple of years, and I am one scientist who has been forced farther and farther to the position that the extraterrestrial hypothesis, but I underscore that word hypothesis, is the most probable hypothesis. I'm ready to throw it over when I see something that categorically rules it out, but this is my position.
Well, this is a different question from the one I was reacting to before. I feel that over a period of time, a couple of years now, that I have been in a position to look at some of the evidence, and certainly I have not seen all of the evidence that might be pertinent. I too have been driven in the direction of recognizing that there are cases that are not explainable in conventional terms. This at least leaves us with the existence of a real UFO. Beyond that, there is the question of whether some of these real UFOs may be under intelligent control. Again, at the present time, I would say that I have seen evidence that is readily interpretable in such terms, but which may also be susceptible of other interpretation. And I would certainly feel that we should...
A list of 50 cases which we gave to the University of Colorado on November 28, 1966 in our initial conference. They had requested such information, and the suggestion was at that time, and this we checked last night.
I won't call it a conspiracy because that would mean that they were immediately at the start making an arrangement with the Air Force. I think that possibly the Air Force was aware of Dr. Condon's negative attitude and did not think that he was going overboard toward a positive answer. I think that this report is extremely flimsy. It's such a meager operation, so few reports considered, and the hundreds and hundreds of those they could have. It evades a number of cases in which the Air Force itself said there was no explanation. It still says so. I tell you, I'm going to break off the rest of this, and I'm going to introduce first Dr. McDonald for a brief statement, and Dr. Saunders, and then we'll throw it open for questions.
Only yesterday, we've only had something like 10 or 12 hours to study these many pages, but it began to hit me that Dr. Condon has apparently not read his own material very carefully, and that would again, I'm afraid, be consistent with his general remoteness from what really went on in the project. I say that because when we tallied first of all, the 59 major cases numbered and identified in the report, we found that the percentage of unexplained cases with which the Condon Committee is left at the end of their scrutiny is 5 to 6 times larger than the percentage of unexplained that Project Blue Book, Air Force Project Blue Book, has been talking about for the last 10 years. They have said 1 to 2, 3%. The number has varied from year to year. Project Blue Book, of the 59 cases, a fraction of about 1/6 are unexplained in this sample. Furthermore, in a sample of 35 that's in another part of the report, Gordon Thayer, a very competent radar propagation and optics man, has gone through. 20% of those cases are unexplained. So here we have a strange situation of the Air Force going along saying for 15 or so years that the unexplained percentage is only 1 or 2%. My own view of the problem is that it ought to be about 25 or 30% when you look at the Air Force cases. But giving Dr. Condon this assignment, and he goes through the whole thing, and you do an actual tabulation, which he doesn't seem to have done, and you find his percentage of unexplained is 5 to 6 times larger than the Air Force. And yet, what is his principal recommendation? The principal recommendation that Dr. Condon has come through with is there's nothing of scientific interest that warrants further attention on the part of the federal government here in any major way. He recommends dropping the whole problem. I think that's an important point.